Good morning and thanks for joining us. It's Thursday, March 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time if you're watching live. And if you're not, it's some other different time. I'm coming to you from the left. I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And I'm coming to you from the right, and I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis.
Thank you for tuning into the DMZ America podcast. We are maybe not highly optimistically hoping to be joined by legendary editorial cartoonist Jeff Danziger. If he does appear, we will pop him immediately into the live feed, but we had some problems getting in touch this morning, so we'll see what happens there. Scott, obviously we are now at day 13 in the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran, with all sorts of military and moral and political and economic implications and results coming out of that. So I think we have plenty to talk about.
Oh, absolutely. And plenty to cartoon about.
We do, yeah.
Let me ask you, you do another show. Yeah, I know you're seeing another podcast. We have an open podcast relationship.
We do. We're very open-minded that way.
But John, being a former CIA guy, how did the CIA in American intelligence get their intelligence so wrong? The New York Times this morning is saying that the bombing of the school, killing, I believe, was 13 children.
175 children, Scott.
Injured. That's the casualties.
No, killed. 175 killed.
All right. That it was predicated on old intelligence at best. Mm-hmm. But we also kind of knew that it was a school. So there's got to be an explanation here, right? There's got to be, we're not so
not a good one, but yeah, there is one.
No, it can be a fuck up of biblical proportions, but it can't. I just find it hard to believe that they would target a school.
I don't think. Well, so here's the thing. Yes. I think it's pretty clear what happened here. Give
it to me.
So what seems to have happened, and I think this is true, is that before the war, while they were preparing for the war, one of the agencies that we don't talk about much, we talk about the CIA and the FBI, but there's there's a dozen or more other intelligence agencies, and one of them is the Defense Intelligence Agency. The other one's called the Maps and Spatial Agency, right? And those two agencies supply maps and target data and GPS coordinates to the Defense Department when they're getting ready to consider military operations. So it turns out that the school was constructed. So basically, it's just like any place, like any municipality has public land that might currently be one thing. Let's say it's let's say you have an air base in Birmingham, Alabama, that is, let's say, shutting down, because it's like, we don't need an air base in. So it's converted to, let's say, a public park. Well, so, it's now still public property, but now it's got a different use. So that something like that appears to be what happened. So between 2013 and 2016, so 10 to 13 years ago, this small little, military substation was subdivided by the Iranians, and they walled it off, and they turned half of it into a public elementary school. That and it's been like that ever since. So that the mapping, the targeting data was accurate. Basically, like we're hitting this spot, and we did hit that spot. But what the Defense Department appears to have thought was that it was still just Revolutionary Guards military installation. They were unaware of the presence of the school on the same territory, because this is the problem with aerial bombardment, right? You don't have anyone on the ground who knows what's actually going on, right? So they didn't. Now, there's a lot of mistakes that went into this. First of all, they had old data, right? I mean, 13 years is a fucking eternity. Yeah. Especially, by the way, there's a reason why we call this the developing world, because they build a lot of things very quickly, right? And trust me, Tehran, and it does not look the same now as it did when I was there in last time in 2011. It's like when I went back to Taliban Afghanistan, it was basically not recognizable 9 years later because so much new stuff had been built. The soccer field was gone. The hospital had moved. Things moved, change. So they did. So that's what happened. They hit a spot.
Okay, let me ask something stupid, and I don't. Again, because I'm not raised in or conversant in the minutia of intelligence gathering, but if you're going to bomb something, that means you're going to destroy it. That's your aim.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't you? I mean, we have satellites, we have a reconnaissance all over the place,
drones.
I mean, all of it. We had to know at some point. There has to be some photographs, just some or video of like little people going into. Did they just think they used their little hands to build munitions, or
kids and parents dropping off their kids at school? I mean, 175 people were killed, right? So, and many more injured. Probably the vast majority were kids, but of course there were teachers and maybe some parents or whatever. Some, the janitor, whatever. But this is a pretty big group of people. I mean, 100. So there had to have been several hundred people there. And if they had like circled a drone over it for even 24 to 72 hours beforehand, or had you can have satellites watch in real time. They would have they would have observed this activity. I mean, that's the kind of data that they used to draw a bead on Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, right? They watched him and his movements and those of his associates for months before the strike. And the war was planned months ahead of time. This isn't like they were caught by surprise.
Well, they were
hurry up.
I have to believe they were building a list of targets for decades, ever since 1979.
So apparently, I will say, Doge appears to have left a footprint, a handprint on this too. So apparently, they seem to have fired 99% of a department whose job was to double, triple, quadruple check targeting coordinates. So,
is that right?
So
that's no surprise.
Like it's called like the Civilian Mitigation Task Force. So basically, like that was a department that was set up to really try to be sure civilians weren't hurt unnecessarily by American military forces.
Good Lord. So, okay, day 13. There's a reason that other administrations didn't do this. Right. They looked at this and said, "Oh, this is a hornet's nest and you're gonna kick this thing." I mean, you look at the size of the country alone; it's a large country. When overlaid across the United States, it takes up what, 2 Texases, Ted? 3? Oh, it pretty much takes up the mid.
It's basically all of Western Europe too. Like it's big. It's
huge. So okay, that's a tactical issue right there. It's
not to mention the terrain is like very forbidding. There's
explain that to me, because I've got to admit. I mean, whenever any American thinks of the Middle East, we all think of sand and desert and Lawrence
that's not it.
That's not it. It is arid.
It's arid for sure. In fact, they have a major, as we talked to to Nick Kosar last week, our Iranian colleague. He's now a water expert. He was explaining, and in fact, he sent me some information that we might bring him back to talk about this. But they have a major drought situation, so it's definitely arid. But okay, so I think a good way to explain it is, if you're familiar with American topography, imagine a country that is like the Western and the Pacific and the Mountain Time zones only. That's basically Iran. So in terms of the topography, so you have, the Rocky Mountain Range, which is, big ass mountains, although those mountains are bigger than the Rockies. You have big ass mountains. Okay. And then you've got, to the east, like that's the border with Afghanistan, that's desert. Okay. And scrub. But then over on sorry, that's I'm sorry, I've got that. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. And then to the west is the border with Iraq, and that also gets dry. But basically, if you just think of it like you don't really have like we have the Great Plains and the Midwest, and that's sort of like the Midwest is very green and lush. Iran doesn't have that, and it doesn't have that sort of relatively flat territory for much. So it's much more mountainous, craggy. I mean, there's ski resorts right on the outskirts of Tehran. So
yeah, I knew there was skiing. I knew there was snow. I mean, that's why when you hear that it's arid and it doesn't get a lot of water, you kind of scratch your head. But Denver, Colorado is an arid place. People don't know this.
Yeah.
And they depend 100% on snowpack and how, and having a lot of snow in the mountains. So it trickles down and they can make Coors beer.
Thank God for that.
Okay. Yeah. Because was Coors a big deal in Ohio? Because Coors
was the beer to get when you're in the mood for urine.
Carbonated urine. Let's be clear. No, I mean,
Coors was a big deal in Ohio because you couldn't get it officially. Right. So you had to know someone who was driving out west.
Yeah,
and I guess it was considered strong or something.
No, it was just. I think it was forbidden. It's just a typical. We've all had Coors beer. It's like
it's not very good.
It's a lager. It's kind of boring. But I had friends in high school who would drive out to Colorado, pick up, fill up their trunk with Coors beer, and would pay for their trip.
Yeah,
they go out, ski, hike, whatever in the Rockies, and then come back. And so because we were like, oh my God, Coors beer.
Yeah, it's true. Very strange.
So crazy. So they don't have that. There is no Tehran beer. There's no Tehran comparable.
No. Pakistan has beer. They make beer.
Do they? Is it any good?
No, it's but let me tell you, you really need a beer when you're in Pakistan. So
I hear it's one of the worst places on the planet. I hear
it's one of my least favorite places. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
Why is that? Then we'll actually get back to talking about the war. But why is it? What did you hate about it?
Well, I mean, first of all, everyone's the anti-Americanism is off the charts. And so, people they see you and they'll be like, oh, let me throw rocks at you, which is not that much fun. And also it's the crime is off the charts in big cities. It's squalid. It's filthy. Now, northern Pakistan, in Pakistani Kashmir, is stunning in the mountains. Still anti-American, but it is, it is very pretty.
So as you're being stoned to death, you can see stuff.
Correct.
So the war. Okay. So the war. I mean, okay. Can I take a sidetrack here and just explain my position? Why I have a peace flag up, and that's actually a flag, by the way, during the buildup to the Iraq War in the 2000s. Remember when presidents used to try to sell us on their wars? At least this was a friend of mine was visiting in Europe, and they were able to get one of these flags from the protest, which says
nice.
Actually, isn't that cool?
That's cool.
I'm anti-war because war is stupid. Let me explain. War, I mean, if you know history, and Ted and I, that's kind of the conceit of this. One of the conceits of this podcast is that we do try to put things in a historical perspective. Wars are dumb because they don't achieve what you think they're going to achieve. They're very, very rarely. We had, World War II, of course, in the middle of the 20th century, which was, I think most people would agree was a necessary war, was unavoidable. But World War I, stupid. Vietnam, stupid. Korea, stupid. Afghanistan/Iraq, stupid. They did not achieve any of the things we had hoped they would achieve. I would even argue that the Spanish-American War, the later part of the 19th century, was stupid because we ended up owning things we didn't really want, but because had imperialist assholes in the Senate and in the political circles said, well, let's expand American democracy, which was the last thing we did in these places like Cuba, like Puerto Rico, like
the Philippines
particularly.
But we upped our waterboarding game in the Philippines.
Well, it's okay. So it wasn't a total loss.
Right.
My point is that it's a waste of time, capital, life, treasure. Wars don't, and the wars in the last 50 years haven't gotten us anything. anything close to what they thought we would. So we have this kind of weird magic, and we continue to cling to it, Ted. I know you have fought against it your entire career. This idea that the military-industrial complex will somehow prevail this time. It didn't the last 30 times, but it will this time.
Right. And not even getting into the morality or the hypocrisy of a country that claims to be a shining beacon on a hill. Not even getting into that, right? Just simply like the things you say will happen will not happen. And the thing is, we're like Lucy in the football, man. We have to have a cartoon analogy here, but it's like, right? I mean, it's totally like I'm seeing the same shit. If we invade Iran, we will then that will create a democratic example that will spread throughout the Muslim world. And we'll see, women will be climbing out of their burqas or their chadors and we will see their luscious brown pulsating Persian boobs all over the place. And it'll be a beautiful thing. Okay. That didn't happen in Iraq.
No.
And
that was a brutal regime too.
But they told us it would, and they said they were sure, and they never said later, oh, it would have worked, but we forgot this or that. It's kind of like they just keep saying the same thing. It keeps not working, and they don't even have like an explanation after the fact to say, oh, this is why we were wrong, but this is why we'll be right next time. They kind of pretend like that didn't happen. And even though we're Americans and we don't remember history, we do remember that.
Well, but small, and we've had the misfortune, if I may, of having successful small actions. Getting what was his name? The pineapple from Panama. Noriega. That was successful. The invasion of Grenada.
Yes, Grenada. That was just mentioned by one of our viewers, Stooped Up.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was a successful operation. But that was a quick...
Although we shouldn't have been involved in it morally, but that's a separate question. How are we going to lose that? Right? I mean, come on.
Well, the Cubans could have gotten involved.
Workers? What are they going to do? Hit us with their shovels?
Well, I think they were hoping that the Cuban government was hoping that they could drag the Russians drag Russia into that.
The Russians weren't stupid enough.
No, it's Grenada. Their flag has the nutmeg on it. Why would why get involved? We not like nutmeg.
Also, the Russians believed in and still believe in spheres of influence. And they're like, American dogs think that Grenada belongs to them, but they are right.
Sort of like, so yeah, I'm looking at this from a historic standpoint, and Ted put it as concisely and as it could possibly be put. And that is, we've done this over and over again, been, bitten in the ass over and over again. And I look back on 20 years in Afghanistan, which I think most Americans, even if you asked them today, would say they were still for it.
Yeah. Like if you said like, oh, we never should have done this. Everyone disagrees with that. They all say like, well, we were right to do it, but but it just didn't work out. Oh, well.
Well, what we could have done in hindsight, and then, okay, listen, I don't want to be anyone's ex-wife here and have my hindsight being 2020, which you should have done. But what we should have done is gone into the northeastern part of Afghanistan where the camps were, got swept there, and then gone into Pakistan.
Well, that wouldn't have taken long since there were no camps then, but okay.
There were camps there.
Not on 9/11 there weren't.
Okay.
They were all closed like several years before.
Go through this. Well, use that as a launching pad then into Pakistan, where
I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Except that Pakistan was a nuclear power already. So
we have a lot more than they do, Ted. just to be clear, they have like one or two.
Do it. Yeah. Wow.
Okay. But that's history. That's why I'm anti-war. I've been anti-war since I was a kid, truly, because I grew up during Vietnam, which is another idiot war that we continue to pour resources in. Oh, this time, like that stupid friggin' line from Rambo. Are we going to do it right this time? Fuck you. First off, we did
It's like, will you really? We
threw all of our military might there, and it didn't work against a force that didn't want to be conquered. And now we have a president, and this is head scratching to me because Trump, revels in being the second best communicator in the presidency. And he never sold us on this thing, Ted. He never went to the
Yeah.
American people and said, hey, they're bad people. They have the bomb. They're going to bomb New Jersey.
There
none
has
of that.
not been a single primetime address or any address to the American people.
So
right?
so look at this.
There's been a couple of short videos released on Truth Social. That's all. Yeah, I have my thoughts, of course,
Okay.
but if we can get to those. But Scott, what are your thoughts? What do you think about what do you think? Why do you think the Trump administration has? It is understood by every presidency that to take the country into war, you need as much support as you possibly can get from the American people. That support is kind of like a leak. It's like a sieve, right? It starts out leaky from the very beginning because the popularity of every war will decline over time because wars are hard. There's setbacks. There's people die. Things get blown up, and that's not popular. Even World War II wasn't, it started out popular, and it ended popular and it ended well, but it sort of nevertheless was less popular over time. If you start at 27%, as this president has started, basically underwater, well, it's got nowhere to go. At best, he ends at 27%. At best. Probably not. Right?
Do you think he was hoping that, do you think the Trump and his administration were hoping that a war would do what it has done for many administrations, which is like, I'm thinking of the invasion of Afghanistan, George W. Bush, popularity 60, 70%. George H.W. Bush during the Persian Gulf War, 90% approval. Do you think they were hoping that just comes with invasion?
Well, look, here's the thing about the 90. I don't see how they could hope that. And the reason I say that is because, George W. Bush and his 90%, he got that because he and Dick Cheney and their minions, Condi Rice and Rumsfeld and all those people, Colin Powell, they spent over a year lubing up the media and the international community and the UN and trying to get allies on board, trying to lie to everyone about Iraq's supposed weapons of mass destruction. So the 90% is, March 2023, right before the troops go in, right? And it's never to be seen again after that, right? It's starts to fall off. But they didn't get the 90% by invading. They got the 90% with all that prep. The invading immediately started to tick it down to into the 80s. So, I don't see how they could possibly think that, right? I don't think they could just think this is dehydrated popularity, just add war and popularity will ensue, because that's not possible. Like I said, the best case scenario for this president, the ceiling on this is 27%, and it's not going to go up. It's not going to be. He's not going to keep the ceiling. So, so what do you think the thinking was inside the administration? I know what I think, but what do you think?
Oh, well, I think that we go into these wars and we're not a very smart country. We don't have a very smart administration. I'm going to disagree with you. I do believe this administration felt, like you said, just add war and your popularity goes through the roof. But they didn't do, weirdly, I still say weirdly, just because Trump, views himself as someone who goes out amongst the people and talks to them, had laid no groundwork for this at all. So why are we in there? I think it's twofold. One, this is something Americans have wanted to do, and they've gotten pressure from the British, for instance, for decades. I think Bibi was putting enormous pressure on Trump for this invasion. Let's not forget that Israel has lobbed a number of bombs into Iran, sorry, as our friend Nick pointed out. I pronounce it like a Southerner. But that's where I think he wanted to be a wartime president. For a guy who wants to pull the Pulitzer, the Nobel Peace Prize so badly, he sure likes bombing shit a lot. The other question here that's kind of festering in the background, I cartooned about it this week, and that's Trump not saying that he might bring back the draft for this.
Well, I don't think he'll bring back the draft because
Oh,
the Defense Department doesn't want him to
they
bring
don't
back
want
the
him to
draft.
do that? Why?
No, because the Defense Department, like, you remember, they got they got dragged into the all volunteer army, kicking and screaming in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, I
They
remember.
hated it.
Sure.
Now they would never go back, right? It's it's like it's the best thing that fucking ever happened to them, because basically there's a war fighting class, and when those people come back in body bags, they fucking volunteered. So everybody kind of knew what the deal was, and so those people don't protest. Whereas, Scott, if it's your kid or my kid who gets dragged kicking and screaming and comes back in a bag, we're fucking pissed, right? So we know that, like, when we go to war, basically it doesn't really affect us, and the only people it affects are the people who are willing to go.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's what I think was the driving force to the United States hating Vietnam by the early 70s, because 50,000 American kids had been killed there. So they're not going to bring the draft back. I'm not even sure why they're bringing it up.
I think it's just like, well, they were asked about it, and they basically are like doing the standard, like, the president of the United States doesn't take anything off the table, right? Like, oh, are you going to use killer vampire bats? Maybe could happen.
Yeah, so suicide poodles to bomb the important sites. But there's two sides to that answer. One is that I'm not going to take anything off the table, but every president besides this moron has said, we're not taking, as commander in chief, I can't take anything off the table. Fair enough. But I don't see any circumstance in the foreseeable future that would call the United States to reinstitute the draft.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you answer that question. But they just do the first part. The president's got to do what a president got to do presidenting, But here, let me finish my thesis on war and why I hate it so much.
I do really think we need to linger on. It's kind of like, a lot of this administration and living under this administration is like, what the fuck are they doing? They're acting weird. And this is one of those things, but I think it's super important. Why the fuck are they not trying to get popular support for this? Why hasn't the president given a single speech?
Well, it sounds to me like you have a theory. I have no theories.
I have a theory, but I want to tell me about your peace thing.
I just said mine's just pure incompetence. Mine is the Donald Trump could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, theology, which is his people will follow him no matter what. That 30% of voters or 27%, whatever the number is. And so regardless, and he doesn't give a shit about the arrest, the other 70%. It's a mistake. Clearly, I think they're going to get their asses kicked in the midterms, assuming there are midterms, and we can talk about that.
That's part of my theory.
Oh, okay. So that's my thought, is that I'm going to tag it to incompetence. Just that I can do anything I want. I'm the commander in chief. I can kill people. He enjoys killing people, by the way. Of any president in our lifetime, I think he is the only one I can remember who actually seems to really take genuine pleasure in killing people.
I think I'm going to surprise you. I think Barack Obama really enjoyed it too. He mentioned he was a bloodthirsty motherfucker. And the way that he bragged about killing Osama bin Laden is, look, you can obviously say yay, we killed Osama bin Laden. Look, I'm a New Yorker. I can, I understand that. But the president of the United States should not say that about anyone. President of the United States should just be like, this is what happened. And, hopefully we can all move on now. But bragging and, making fun. Think about, he was in the room when watching on live television with Hillary Clinton, when Gaddafi was being sodomized with a bayonet on international television. And she cackled famously and said, we saw he died. Because that was our drone that caused those events, set those events into motion. And he fucking thought it was hilarious. Obama made up a term for people whose heads explode when they're killed by an American Hellfire missile: squirters. Like, oh, we got a squirter.
Oh, good God.
Bush was pretty bloodthirsty. My experience has been, my observation has been that American presidents who've actually served in the military for real, not like Texas Air National Guard, like basically guarding our margaritas from the Mexicans.
Not one Viet Cong got into Arkansas. It's important to note, but please go on.
Those things, I mean, yeah. Look, I think there's a lot to unpack about this Iran war, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it here. He's got, this war, first of all, think about the fact that he's also doing something that we've never done before. We never had like a partner who was like, it's us and Israel who are holding hands, and we have a joint partnership taking on Iran. Now, we know that the Israelis have had a hard-on for the Iranians for decades. So, and again, whether it's justified or not is neither here nor there. The point is, we know that's really their bugbear, right? And so, like this, so we know that like this is kind of like they asked us to go in on it, and we're like, okay, but this is their project. It wasn't our idea; it was their idea. And so even if we agreed enthusiastically, the fact is it's their idea. So that's weird. Then there's the fact that this war, there's been no communication from the White House of any sort. And they snuck the war in against the American people. They didn't prepare us for it. They didn't prepare us for it once it's to get ready for it after it started. They never enumerated what their casus belli or what their war aims were. They did it on a fucking weekend news dump. There's no bragging. If you want to be a wartime president, why are you not giving speeches that make you look tough? That's a Donald Trump special. He loves that, to like be like badass. We're killing the bad guys. America's winning as usual. Iran is destroyed. We're getting all that messaging to the base on social media, but we're not getting it to the people writ large. I mean, that's very weird behavior.
Oh, very.
We've never seen a war. I'm 62. I've never seen a war like this.
No, I'm 66, and same here.
Okay. So, all right. My theory is.
So your theory.
All right. So my theory is like, well, under normal circumstances, the president needs to care and needs to mitigate any kind of, public disapproval that comes out of any policy he does. A war is a major policy, the kind of policy everyone pays attention to, especially a war against, this is a major war, and one that's also going to have all sorts of economic effects. It already is. Yeah. Oil's $100 a barrel. Oil's gone up 70%, in 2 weeks. So that's fucking insane. So yeah, we're going to have inflation. We're going to have high unemployment. We're going to have a global recession. All that's like a given, right? So, that's not stuff you want to go into a midterm election with. So if you have that going on, you're going to do everything you can to mitigate your losses as much as possible. This administration's not lifting a finger to do those things. Can we stipulate to that?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
All right.
Well, so, it is releasing, I think 40 million barrels from the Federal Reserve.
Yeah,
which is nothing. By the way, this country goes through that in a day.
So, right. It's nothing. Okay. Nothing. So that makes me think Donald Trump is good at one thing, which is protecting Donald Trump. And I think, and I keep coming back to, like, if I'm Donald Trump, why do I not care about the midterm elections? And it's like, well, he should care because he's going to be, and I know he cares because he's like privately told Republican leaders he's worried about being impeached again. He doesn't want that. So he does care. Well, because he doesn't think he's going to have a midterm election to deal with. So I think, so working backwards, right? Like, what is the number one thing motivating Donald John Trump right now? The number one thing is you don't want to go to prison on January 21st, 2029. We're Americans, so we've forgotten all about this, but he has 34 felony convictions in state court hanging over him. Neither he nor anyone else, except for, like, say, the governor of New York and the governor of Georgia, can pardon him, right, for those convictions. So I don't see Governor Kathy Hochul or her successor pardoning him. So he knows that he can't get out of it. The only way he can not go to prison in 2029 is to still be president of the United States. Stop me if, by the way, before I move on with my theory, do you agree with that?
Well, to a point. Let me just throw some sand in the fan there and just say that he recently, in the last week, he's been on the campaign trail for various Republican candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you that, obviously he's thinking. I mean, as things stand today, he's still thinking there's going to be an election. Now, to your point, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think if they can find a way, there are people we're hearing, meaning Ted and I and others who follow news and look at niche reporting. There is niche reporting that there are people in this administration looking for a legal way to suspend the election.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fact. Now, the fact that someone's looking into this, not just as like, oh, here's an intellectual exercise by some kid at Princeton, School of Law. This is the administration looking into it. That's a lot more serious. So, Ted, to your point, clearly they're thinking the same way you are, but the president's actions in the last few days have shown that there will be an election.
Well, maybe maybe he's hedging his bets the same way that someone who plays roulette puts a chip both on red and on black, right? It's like, I think, maybe that's the case. But the point is, he knows that he's going to, that he has this threat, this sort of Damocles hanging over him. Okay, so then how do you remain in office, right? Well, you could just say, well, we're going to cancel the 2028 election. No need to cancel the 2026 election. But why would you not cancel the 2026 election first? I mean, first of all, you would then be freezing a Congress with a Republican majority in the House and the Senate in place. You're not going to have that after the 2026 election.
Right.
Certainly not. You won't have the House, right? You might have impeachment proceedings. If and when you lose the House, all of those, like the House Oversight Committee, all of these, House committees with investigatory subpoena powers suddenly are, in place under Democratic control. He knows the Democrats are out to get him personally. We know that from the 4 years of the Biden administration, they were out to get him personally. So basically, it's lawfare. So you would, of course, want to keep the Republican. And the other reason you'd want to start with 2026 by suspending the election is like, well, people don't vote in or care about midterm elections as much as they care about presidential elections. So people aren't going to be as mad about a canceled midterm election as they will about a canceled presidential election. So you'll have less civil unrest. You'll have less reaction in the street. And by 2028, once everything's settled down, Americans will start to get used to the idea that they don't get to vote anymore. So it'll be like Ukraine. Like, you cancel one election. Well, it's just one election. Well, maybe we'll do two. Maybe we'll do three.
No, I think there's a lot of validity to what you're saying. That self-preservation is the number one motivator for Donald Trump. I'm still doesn't quite address the not getting the American people behind the war, because if you're going to use the war,
it totally does.
Help me.
Okay, so if you are already in the back of your mind thinking like, you should definitely vote. You should definitely vote to reelect Scott Stantis, good MAGA Republican, to the Senate. But you're like, we're not going to have an election, really. But if you're really thinking you're not going to have an election, why on earth would you fucking waste any of your time or energy going to the American people and getting their support for the war? Number one. Number two, there's no better excuse for a national emergency than a war. We're at war with the Iranians. They've launched a cyber attack against our election process. We have to check all the voting booths to make sure all the polls are being counted, the votes are being counted accurately. Why do you think he's got this huge hard-on over the Save America Act, which, by the way, parenthetically, you read my column 2 weeks ago, will screw Republican voters more than Democratic?
Yes, which is weird, but okay.
It's really weird. Democrats should want it. Republicans should not want it, but there you go. But like, why do you think he's so obsessed? He's basically saying the elections are not trustworthy.
Yeah.
There's so if you have like Iran as your bugaboo, they're going to hack the elections. It's perfect. And if the war's still going on, things are still blowing up, oil is now $300 a barrel, and gas is $20 a gallon, and the economy's all seized up. We can't have an election. We never had an election during times of national trouble in the past, nor will we in the future. Much as President Lincoln canceled the 1864 election. Good for him. That's what they literally will say that.
Yeah, listen, you're absolutely right. I also happen to think that because this isn't just a one-off or a 2-day campaign, this campaign, as you've mentioned, is in day 13. I'm thinking they want to gig the Iranians into having some kind of an attack in the United States, in the contiguous 48. What does that look like? Does that mean somehow getting a drone close enough to blow up Atlanta, or blow a crater in Nashville? I don't know what this could possibly mean. Are there sleeper cells and all the other stuff? No, I find that, but you never know. But I really do.
I don't believe that, John.
But I think more damaging and more to their point would be something from the Iranian government coming in and blowing something up.
Yeah, maybe. They claim, of course, everyone in wartime says this, right? But by the way, the propaganda war with AI videos and everything has been crazy, including from the Iranians. And the Iranian, they just released a video a couple days ago, set to the sound of Nancy Sinatra's "These Boots Are Made for Walking," and it's shows that it suggests that Iran has secret long-range missiles that it could use to attack Israel or the United States. I mean, it's
definitely can hit Israel. United States, I think, would be a stretch, but they do have submarines that are small submarines. I'm not sure they can go transatlantic, can they?
I don't think so.
Or trans-Pacific.
Not without us knowing.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Ted? Okay, I'm going to jump on that comment, because the fact is we have all this money, all this resources put towards intelligence gathering, and we're still no good at it. So the presumption is, if they had submarines off the coast of California, we'd know it. I'm not convinced we would.
By the way,
I don't think our intelligence agency is that good. What's that?
This was a story from yesterday that you're alluding to, that Iran wants to attack the U.S. by submarine or from the Pacific Ocean, the West Coast. And I'm like, I don't know. I want to do lots of things, right? But big fucking deal. But it's okay, why the West Coast and not the East Coast? Also, why would Iran come around the long way to the West Coast when they can come around the less long, but also long way to the East Coast? Why? This was kind of like, they want to do this, and there's no explanation for why they might want to do it. Do you have any idea? Because I don't.
Why they'd want to?
They're coming they're coming after our soft side belly.
I never understood the attackers of 9/11. I know this sounds horrible, but what I never understood is why they targeted only these big, like the towers. The White House was initially one of the targets in the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania was heading towards Washington, D.C. as well. Why not fly bombs? Could you imagine if they had hit Dayton, Ohio, or Birmingham, Alabama, or someplace totally off, like no one would have thought?
Right.
Why? That would have struck genuine fear into Americans' hearts. You're not safe anywhere.
Yeah, heartland.
So with this, I think, first of all, it's the intelligence agency. Well, they want to bomb, like Ted, we all want to do something. We're not going to do it, but we'd like to.
Sure.
Is there a practical, but I'm just coming back to,
I'd love to be on the cover of the New Yorker next week. We all want things.
Yeah. Well, and so things like the tanker that left Venezuela and took the coast, the American Navy and Coast Guard on a merry chase for almost a week. This is not something small or particularly fast. And they still had a hell of a time finding it. Now, could you imagine a submarine that if they stay submerged for any, these aren't nuclear, I'm assuming, so that's going to be, they have to, you know, run on top of the water. And so I guess you could presumably find them, but I'm just not convinced that our intelligence agency is all that good.
Well, that's a fair point. I mean, it's certainly true that the Iranians must have secrets that we don't know. And I still want to know where the fucking hypersonic missiles are. Are they
those are the ones we're afraid of.
Are they just holding them back?
Because you can't, as you've mentioned in other podcasts, we cannot stop them. That's their whole purpose, is that they are very, very difficult to stop. Unlike the other missiles they've been lobbing at Israel, and Israel's been very successful at blocking. But yeah, you said a supersonic thing. And so I think they are saving that for just a special occasion.
Yeah.
Now it can reach Europe, if I'm not mistaken. It cannot reach the
Eastern, and like it can get as far as Greece or like Poland.
Could hit Albania. Could you imagine the cartoons then? You'd have the
no one would even notice.
you'd have the two-headed eagle on the Albanian flag with a tear.
So true.
I just looking at some of the work done by some of our compatriots. It's so where does this go, Ted? If you had to lay out the roadmap, and I'm sure you've given this a lot of thought, where does this go from here? I mean, day 13, we're still bombing. Israel is still bombing the shit out of it because apparently we're okay with that.
I mean, the thing is, obviously, right, like famously, people have said in a variety of ways, once you let loose the dogs of war, right, you just never know what's going to happen next, right? Or like was it Mike Tyson who said, like, all your best laid plans, come crashing down once someone smashes you in the face.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, I mean, and I think that's right. This is going to be, war is an inherently unpredictable business. That said, I don't think we're going to end up with like waking up in a week and hearing that the Iranians and the United States have agreed to a ceasefire, and that we're just going to go back to a frozen conflict, and the Israelis will be saying, "Yeah, we'll be back next year for more if we feel like the Iranians are getting spicy." I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Iranians tried a measured response a year ago, and it didn't work for them. And so, this was like, and with all the rhetoric and the fact that it's a joint partnership between the U.S. and Israel in the way that it is, I think that the message to the Iranians is, these people killed our supreme leader. They say this is about regime change. This is existential. They're trying to destroy us. So what we have to do is make their lives as miserable as possible for as long as possible, that their political will starts to collapse and they can't keep it up, both in Israel and in the United States. And that's a delicate dance. They have to hurt our stuff and hurt other stuff enough to make that true without doing something so dramatic, like, say, I don't know, like killing 20,000 Israelis or something, that it pisses everyone off on the West and gets people like you and me who never were behind this to say, okay, now the Iranians have gone too far and we have to kick their ass. So they have to sort of thread that needle and, inflict pain, some significant but not excessive pain.
Let me say that the pain that they can inflict on us, first of all, I can't speak.
It's economic.
I can't speak to you up there in Yankee land, but down here, everyone drives a truck that's the size of a house.
And it costs, like, as it is, it costs $150 to fill up your tank. Yeah.
Now it's going to be $250 to fill that thing up.
Yeah.
That's the kind of pain Americans recognize, and they're not going to take lying down. They're going to say, you got to do something about this.
Iran just today, I mean, of course, obviously it's wartime propaganda, but Iran is saying, like, oh, get ready. Oil will be $200 a gallon soon, $200 a barrel soon.
They're not wrong. And let's face it, the oil fields we've commandeered in Venezuela, that helps the Trump and his family a lot. I mean, if it's $200 a barrel, Jesus. I mean, and do you think House of Saud cares? Do you think House of Saud is sad about that?
Right. No, not so much. And do you think Vladimir Putin is sad about that?
No, he's going to have more money than he knows what to do with. He could invade,
Anyone.
Lithuania.
Well, it's not like he doesn't know where. It's not like they haven't been there before.
That's true.
So they know the way. They have the old maps.
They do.
So I guess So I think I think the Iranians are gonna fuck up the global economy. They're gonna inflict a lot of pain. I think
they're not going to bomb the United States.
They can't, and they won't.
Even if they could, they won't.
And that's going to be, and I think I think domestically here in the United States, watch for a clampdown where you start to see more, use of ICE in American cities, more state terrorism against dissent, and think about how remarkable it is.
Well, I gotta stop you.
There's been no substantial anti-war protest against the attacks on Iran.
Well, because we're attacking someone who's not very nice. They're just
But also the left is incomplete. Like the left doesn't exist at all. There's no left.
They're go to a coffee shop, Ted. They're there.
Yeah, well, they're leftists. They're theoretical leftists. They're leftists. It's like the way I'm a theoretical dog owner. Oh, I love dogs. I mean, do you have one? No. Ever had one? No. Do you think you'll ever have one? Probably not. But I love dogs. It's like, theoretically, I'm a huge revolutionary leftist. I'm not going to go and fuck around with ICE in the streets. That would, they could put a dent in my skull. Don't want that.
And what's interesting to me is the social is saying that the savior of the country, the people who are really going to be pissed off about this, are MAGA. And I'm going, really? You really believe this? Do you?
Yeah, I don't believe that for a minute.
No.
Look, I think MAGA people view this as a distraction. They're right. They view this as a waste of resources that could be used for stuff that would help the American people. They're right about that too.
Absolutely.
But they're not sort of seeing it like, listen, the populist left needs to make common cause with the populist right on this one issue, which is we should be directing resources here at home, not overseas. And it's like the left can't make common cause with the right because we know that the right just wants to give all those resources to the rich. And the right can't make common cause with the left because they think, first of all, deep down, they kind of get horny at the thought of war, and they're really they can't stand the fact that we like trans people. So, that's it. And so Trump's going to continue to the Trump administration is going to continue to drive this fucking country into the fucking ground. And, and the Democrats are going to let them. I mean, by the way, I think it's hilarious that the Democrats are still complaining about the war power stuff. Like you should have come to us for approval, which of course we would have given you, but we want to be asked. Like, we're sluts. I mean, we're going to spread our legs, but you should have asked. Consent is important, but we're horny. Stick it in.
Buy us dinner. Come on.
Yeah, or a hot dog, whatever, something. Rice Krispie treat, anything.
Yeah, there's no opposition to this thing that's organized, and it's gonna be the thing that Ted rails about a lot, which is every third Saturday of the month they're going to have, like, if the weather permits, they're going to have a protest, and it's like that's not how you
couldn't have it this week because there was a small drizzle coming from the northeast. The temperature was 2 degrees colder than expected. So
polar vortex, the whole smash.
Yeah.
So you don't see, before I let you go, before we end this thing, you don't see the Trump administration just declaring victory like in a couple more weeks and saying,
I can see them trying to do that
and leaving and just stopping.
But if they do that, it's a major mistake.
How so?
Well, I mean, because the Iranians will keep going, and then he'll look like a fool.
Yeah.
The Iranians have to keep going. And if you and I are in the Iranian leadership, we might not want this war, but we know that we have to like now is the time. It's now or never. Not to mention, we're not popular in our own country, right? The Iranian government's not popular. The only thing that will allow them to try to make themselves less unpopular is to be perceived as defending the country from an invader and from the Zionists. That they have to fight the Americans and the Israelis for that purpose alone.
No, yeah, I couldn't agree more. That the Iranians, we may stop. Trump may throw up his hands and say, mission accomplished.
Yeah,
they have to find a big and gross flight suit for him to land on an aircraft carrier somewhere.
He wants this to be over, and I mean he's watching the markets.
Do you think he's surprised that it has gone tits up this fast?
Yeah, because and I think, and the problem is I'm not surprised by that because he's an imbecile, but I'm surprised that all the people around him are also imbeciles. But very clearly, the American people, American, policymakers and planners, strategists, they never fucking put themselves in the mindset of their enemies. They don't think, if I were Iranian, what would I be thinking? If I were the Ayatollah, what would I be thinking? What would I be doing? It's really weird.
When we went to Iraq, at the highest levels seemed surprised that there were 3 forms of Islam in Iraq. They had no idea. Something as basic and fundamental as that. They're like, what's that?
There's no knowledge. I mean, I remember riding in on the back of a truck into Afghanistan with this reporter from the UK Independent, who, by the way, on the same trip got killed. And we were looking around and he goes, you Americans, you should have a 3-city rule for the countries you invade. And I said, what's that? He goes, the average American should be able to name 3 cities in any country you invade. It should just be an international law. And I'm like, dude, we couldn't invade Canada.
Which may be his point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because ask an American, what was they tried this a few years ago and they asked, what's the capital of Canada? And 78% said
Toronto. Yes. Yeah, I'm sure.
Which is wrong.
It's wrong. Yeah.
Everyone knows it's Vancouver.
Everyone knows. Everyone knows it's Saskatchewan.
It's Ontario, by the way.
It's none of it. No, it's Ottawa.
Oh, it's Ottawa. I said Ontario. No, Ottawa.
Yeah. All right.
So I'm a typical American here.
Oh my God. Well, you're about to get a call. It's like Scott Stantis is now working for the Trump White House.
Yeah.
Okay.
I might be high level.
Can you imagine? All right. So now we come to the part of the show that everybody waits for every week, which is the Scott Stantis singing experience.
And we have.
Oh my God!
I want Ted. I need Ted to join in with me. You know what to do. Go ahead.
I have a feeling I will. Okay.
You ready? Are saying